Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. Lots to talk about in today's show. A really surprising story that I'm sure you guys will find very interesting. And it brings up a lot of different things the Dolphins could do, depending on if the story is true or not. So some interesting stuff to talk about. Let's get through some of the small stuff that I think we already talked about. Some of the smaller move stuff. The Dolphins obviously retaining Andrew Van Ginkel. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. This is a really good signing. Really good run defender, really just good rotational role player that maybe Vic Fangio can elevate a little bit. We'll see. Maybe he'll be dropped back less in covers than he was last year. That was a huge issue with a lot of the outside linebackers that played in that scheme, especially this past season. It was a big problem. And hopefully we'll see less of that from Van Ginkel, which he was not good at that at all. And we get to see more of the stuff that he is good at, like, good on early downs and maybe some third down pass rush stuff. This is also something I think we might have talked about last week. Dolphins re-signed Justin Bethel, obviously a great special teamer. Picked off Kenny Pickett in that fun, crazy Steelers, I believe it was Monday night game that was almost gave me a heart attack. Mick Benogany's best game as a Dolphin. So yeah, Justin Bethel coming back, really good for special teams. Obviously that was an area of concern last year. Mainly, I would say kickoff coverage was the worst part. Punt coverage wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as the kickoff team was. So getting someone like him to come back and lead a special teams group is good. Obviously, the room's kind of flipped around a little bit with Bailey coming in from New England. So I'm interested to see how it works out this year. It's a step in the right direction, though. Making sure there's no other smaller. This is not smaller. This is one of the bigger news stories of the day. Dolphins willing to trade wide receiver Cedric Wilson. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. The report first came from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, who seems to be reporting a lot of some of the bigger moves this year. Obviously a long-time beat writer and long-time, I would say, a trusted Dolphins fan person to listen to. Cedric Wilson, 27 years old. It would actually cost the Dolphins more to cut him than to keep him, which is one of the big reasons why the trade makes more sense. Some of the numbers, if he was traded, it would result in $7 million in cap savings if he was traded before June 1st. So that would be the incentive of trading him, saving $7 million against the cap. And then if they traded him after June 1st, it would only save $6 million. They would actually owe Cedric Wilson more dead cap money if they cut him outright. And again, they would save more money against the cap if they just kept him. So maybe I don't think he'll be traded. It would be interesting to see if they team this deal up with another deal, which is we're going to talk about here in a second. I just don't see the angle for the Dolphins to get better. I actually think, and I know people are going to freak out, he looked better at the end of last year than he did through most of the season. He was dealing with an injury. He looked a lot better at the end of the year athletically. This is a guy who is a talented player. We didn't really get to see that last year. He's a really good 3. At least he was for Dallas. Maybe they can get some of that out of him this year. I would rather just keep him for training camp and preseason just to see how things shake out. Obviously, the addition of Braxton Berrios is interesting. They still have Eric Ezukama on their roster. Maybe he develops into a starting role this year. So there's definitely a lot of depth at that position. They still have Saunders from last year who did get some playing time as an undrafted free agent. We'll see what the Dolphins do with some of the draft stuff. I think the receiver, not that it's important at all because it's not, but there's a lot of interesting options for the Dolphins. So definitely could see if they did trade him. Obviously, they're comfortable with the depth there, but I wouldn't mind keeping him around just to see if maybe we can get some of the Cedric Wilson that Dallas got from him, because he's a way better version of Trent Sherfield, and I don't know. Maybe he can kind of unlock some of that we didn't get to see last year. And again, maybe Braxton Berrios can too. Again, a lot of people, forget that was the first year for a lot of guys in that offense. They're going into their second season in the offense, second season with Tua. Maybe some things can kind of develop in the right direction. One thing I will mention about Braxton, I wouldn't say our schemes are similar to what like the LaFleur's run in Green Bay. There are definitely similarities formationally, but I think definitely from in the passing game, there are some huge differences. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe Cedric Wilson or Eric Ezukama can take advantage of that. The battle for that third receiver spot is going to be really interesting, for sure. So this is an interesting story, obviously. Dolphins inquired on Vikings running back Dalvin Cook before they signed Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert earlier this season. This comes from the Miami Herald from Barry Jackson. They reached out to Minnesota. Obviously, nothing got done. Maybe something will get done, though, soon. Maybe after the draft when, teams can kind of gauge what they got out of the draft. I wouldn't be surprised if he was traded somewhere at the very least. Obviously, the Dolphins, it wouldn't really matter if it was after the draft or before the draft. They could definitely make the trade with the capital that they have. The Vikings reached out to David Montgomery in free agency, so clearly, obviously, they re-signed Madison to a bigger contract than what the Dolphins gave to Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson. So they're paying their backup running back a lot of money. Clearly, they like him. It's someone who's started a few games. Maybe they're willing to get rid of Dalvin Cook. He's a great scheme fit. Out of all the guys that I've seen mentioned or rumored in the offseason, he's by far the best scheme fit. Obviously, Saquon Barkley's another name. But this is, I think, more likely whether he'll be a Dolphin or on some other team. I could totally see him. Clearly we're preparing to get rid of him. And maybe they're going to wait till after the draft. There's a lot of running backs that I like. But I think one thing that I will say about this, and I know some fans are probably like, what about the tackle position? Which I'm totally with that side of the fan base. But if you came to me and were like, Dalvin Cook, it makes a lot of sense. He fits the scheme. He's a dual threat running back. He can affect the passing game. He's a phenomenal playmaker. He would help Tua out a lot, take a lot of pressure off of him. And it just would make the offense that much tougher to defend. It would help out spacing a ton because of the Hill and Waddle threat. Now you have Cook in the backfield. You can just do a lot of different stuff with that. And Raheem Mostert backing him up. And you're not paying Jeff Wilson that much money. You're not paying Raheem Mostert. You're not attached to the hip with these guys. I'm fairly certain. I don't know how much cap room that they would have to clear up. But maybe you throw in a Cedric Wilson in that deal. You save $7 million against the cap. You could do something like that. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But the fact that the Dolphins reached out to the Vikings shows that they were at least interested in upgrading that room. They currently hold a second-round pick. There's a lot of really nice running backs in the draft. Maybe that's an actual area that they're interested in. If someone like a Jahmyr Gibbs, who has a very similar game to Dalvin Cook, is there, one of my favorite. I think probably all Dolphins fans' one of their favorites is obviously Gibbs. Maybe that's an option now. So it's an interesting story. Maybe something will come of it. It makes a lot of sense. He's obviously a Miami kid too, which is a bonus. So I don't know. Barry Jackson, obviously very close to the organization. I would imagine the communication with the current regime is pretty easy. I don't think it would be hard to pull, it's like pulling teeth from a baby to get news from them. Probably, just how I don't know, just it wouldn't seem that hard. So obviously Mike McDaniel and Dalvin Cook would be a match made in heaven. I think the biggest thing it would do is take pressure off of Tua and really open up the run game, which is a huge need. So yeah, I'm all for it if it happens. There's a lot of interesting incentive for the Dolphins to get a deal like that done. He's still young and he's one of the best players in the league. If the Dolphins won a championship, I don't see why not go after someone like Dalvin Cook. I will say that if we look at recent history, if you look at all of the big name running back trades, if you set aside the Christian McCaffrey trade, it does not bode well for the team that receives the running back. Like every time, the Marco Murray deal didn't really turn out all that great. Had a couple really nice years in Tennessee. Philly kind of fell off. It wasn't great. I will say the argument for it, and this is why the McCaffrey trade worked, those players, all of those players that those running backs were traded to weren't contenders. So that would be something that I would consider. And Dalvin Cook is a special talent. He is very special. He's not, I would say, a normal running back or even like an average or a little bit of above average player. He's a phenomenal player. So we're talking about an all-pro type of a player. So considering all of those things and the need to keep Tua healthy, it would be a nice trade. That is it for the news, I believe. Interesting stuff, though, because it makes me think maybe they could still draft one. I'm not comfortable with the backfield as it is right now. I love Raheem Mostert. I think he played a lot better than I thought he would. Ran with a lot more power than I thought he did. He's a very good player. He could actually make a Pro Bowl still in it. He has a Pro Bowl left in his career. If the offensive line gets better and plays better. But Dalvin Cook would just do a lot of really nice things, and a player like Gibbs would too. So it does make me happy that they're at least exploring the running back market. There's some other names that have been thrown out. Austin Eckler still out there, obviously. Saquon Barkley, his name kind of got floated around recently in the news. So maybe it is possible that they could get someone. I think Eckler, Barkley, I would say Cook and Barkley are probably the best fits. Eckler fits, but I think he would be more used like as a Darren Sproles type of player as opposed to someone who really fits the run scheme. Cook and Barkley really, really fit the run scheme, just with their running styles. I think that it's too perfect to kind of pass up. So it does make me happy that they're at least interested in some of the running backs. I wonder how Dolphins fans would feel. I don't know how many of you are University of Miami fans, but obviously Dalvin Cook, former Florida State player. That's it for the news, I believe. There's nothing else I really want to talk about. So let's get into the fan Q&A. Kind of a shorter episode today. This first question comes from Douglas Ward. And you know what? I gotta go through the draft tackles. Like, I've been really meaning to do that because I think it's a huge problem on this team. And I think I would like to at least know what the depth situation is there. I haven't really looked into it that much, so something I definitely want to do. This first question comes from Douglas Ward. He says, how about the best running back or tight end available in the second round? Again, this question comes from Douglas. To have a good young back behind Mostert and Wilson makes a lot of sense to me. We also should have re-signed Gesicki a couple of years ago on a cheaper deal. It's a shame to see him go to New England. You know, I've heard a lot of Dolphins fans say that. I'm not a big fan of Mike Gesicki, even though I was pounding the table for him to get drafted. I loved him out of Penn State. But I don't know. The last 2 years, I'm kind of over it. I think it's an improvement to the team, especially if they're looking to upgrade at that position and find someone who can fit what they want to do better. So I know there's some sentimentality with him. He was a part of some interesting teams throughout his career. He had he had 3 winning seasons as a Dolphin, which not many former Dolphins can say over the last 15 years. He was a part of the Tank for Two a year, which is actually, as many people might think, it wasn't fun. It wasn't a great year. But I don't know. The last 2 months of that season were actually pretty nice. They were actually fun. So he was a part of that team. He was a big part of that team. So I can see why there's some attachment to him. But in my opinion, he just played so bad last year that I don't know. They need to improve that position. I don't know how they're going to do it. They're going to have to make a decision. Maybe it comes down to, okay, obviously value. How much do they value the right tackle position? Who's the player that, is there? Do they value running back over tight end at this point? I don't know. This question comes from SM. He says the fact that we let tackle Brandon Shell and Greg Little go and haven't re-signed them leads me to believe that we have plans for that position other than Austin Jackson. Thoughts? I hope so. I hope so. And again, I really need to get into the tackle depth at that position. Right tackle, especially going through the league, not valued that much. There's only a few guys in the NFL. I'd say there's probably 6 or 7 of them that are high-level guys. It was really kind of weird looking at the list. I'm like, man, there's a lot of teams in the league that don't have great right tackles. Like, there's very, very few. So it's a tough position, clearly. It's not very valued. So I don't know. We'll see what they do. I don't know. We'll see what happens. People forget, and I know I keep bringing this up, even though I'm not a believer in the Austin Jackson stuff, but apparently he had a phenomenal offseason. And this was coming from skeptical people like Omar Kelly and, kind of more negative skeptic type beat writer stuff. So, which kind of means something. We'll see what he does this year. I don't know. I've just never been. I don't think any of us have been a huge fan of what he has done so far. This next question comes from SM. He says, GM Skaggs, tackle, tight end, and running back in the second round. Okay, well, this is literally the theme of this podcast. It's going to be interesting. Well, hopefully, who knows? Maybe they trade it in a Cook trade. But how cool would it be if we got TJ Hawkinson in that trade too? But anyway, it's tough. Like, I don't know much about the right tackle position. I know there's a few guys that I've seen. I don't know how. I just couldn't, with a good conscience, be like, okay, him versus this guy. There's a lot of tight ends that I really like. I'm forgetting the South Dakota tight end. Obviously Sam Laporta, who I'm a huge fan of out of Iowa. I really like his game. I'm not a huge fan of Darnell Washington. I don't know. I think his ceiling is probably Mercedes Lewis. He just doesn't look like he's going to become much of a receiving threat. Obviously, Mike Meyer probably won't make it to the second round, or that particular pick. So, I would probably, and then if Gibbs is there, that would be tough not to pick him. I don't know. It honestly comes down to the tackle market. But to me, if I had a board in terms of positional need, tackle would be 1. I would say tight end probably 2 and running back 3, even though I love Gibbs as much as I do. Those 2 positions don't have a clear starter there. So that's why I would probably value those 2 over the running back position, because I think Raheem Mostert is definitely an above average starting running back, in my opinion. This next question comes from Douglas. He says, how about grabbing DJ Fluker on a 2-year deal, a 2-year prove-it deal? Austin Jackson is more injury-prone than Tua, and Liam Eichenberg is still struggling to develop. Not addressing the O-line seems to be my biggest concern. Maybe Greer knows something we all don't. All is just, maybe Greer knows something we all don't. Is just all out of cap space. What is your thoughts? Or maybe he's just all out of cap space. What is your thoughts? I don't know. you could. There is a interesting argument to be made that one of the through lines of Chris Grier's tenure, even though he's been through 3 coaches at this point, Mike McDaniel being his third, the running back position has not been valued at all. And neither has the offensive line, other than 2016, which, if I remember correctly, no, I don't think Dennis Hickey was the GM. I don't know how long Chris Grier has been the GM of this team, for the love of God. Maybe 2016. What was Chris's first year as the GM? Was it after 2015? I know the 2014 draft was Dennis Hickey, because he drafted Jarvis Landry. I don't remember. But the point is that it hasn't been valued for a while here. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I will say this. Chris Grier has done a phenomenal job at managing the cap, and he's done a great job at that. He's really good at it. And he's done a great job at drafting in the later rounds. He's done a good job at drafting the last few years. He's hit on some players, but clearly his weakest spot, and it's not even close, is the offensive line. That has been below average at best. The best lineman he's picked in his career is by far Laramie Tunsil. And then after you go from Tunsil and you look at some of the other picks, not great. So, I don't know. Hopefully that turns around. The good news is that most of the great pass rushers in the league do not line up over the right tackle position. Now, that really doesn't seem to matter anymore because a lot of the great pass rushers in the league move across the defensive line a lot, and they stunt a lot. So you kind of need to have a solid all-around offensive line more than ever. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. I just hope that we at least get competition in the room. At this point, if we're not going to get a veteran, would not mind drafting one in the second round. Even though offensive linemen aren't the sexiest picks in the world, it is what it is. Robert Hunt was a good pick. He turned out to be a good player. Connor Williams, great free agency signing. Same thing with Terron Armstead. He was a great free agency signing too. So it's not like he doesn't have an eye for talent on the offensive line, but that's by far it's not even close, the position he's missed out on the most. I mean, we could go through the litany of players that this man has missed on, whether it was, we can just go through the line. We'd be here for 5 minutes, but it's clearly his weakness. And I'm not giving Michael Dieter, Solomon Kinley, we can go on and on. I'm not giving up on Eichenberg yet, but yeah, clearly it's his weakest position. Anyway, that's it, guys. I hope this week we get some interesting news, and this month should be fun. We'll see what the Dolphins come out of this month with. Obviously, the month of April, a lot of interesting stuff they could do. I would suspect a major trade if it were to happen after the draft. Maybe someone like the Rams and Havenstein or Havenstein, which would be clutch for the Dolphins, or maybe even Cook, because they could still use that second round pick on somebody and then maybe use some future draft capital to go out and get somebody that they can plug and play and can really help them win. So that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you would do with the second round pick, and I'll see you guys in the next one.